Chapter 5, the classical period, directions, diversity, and the decline by 500 CE. We'll be seeing the end of the classical period. Our next unit we'll be covering will be post-classical, so there are some transitional things that will be occurring right here that we will read about a little bit in the post-classical, such as dealing with Islam, the fall of India, some of the things that happened with Japan and the spread of Chinese culture. All right, expansion and integration and synthesis, all right. Confucian ideas spreading, Buddhist ideas spreading, philosophy from Socrates spreading in these areas. Unification of territory, political, legal, commercial networks will be established, also some broken down in areas. Social aspects are going to develop outside of some of these civilizations. Inequalities will continue to grow in some areas and cause problems, cause uprisings and rebellions among peasant classes as well. So there's a lot happening. Other places in the world having more and more contact with these civilizations and them themselves either wanting more power or wanting to experience what had been occurring in these areas. Beyond the classical civilization, independent developments by 600 CE, we'll look at Sub-Saharan Africa. The Upper Nile region, remember, it flows to the Mediterranean. You'll have the Kush Empire by 1000 BCE. They will consider themselves heirs to the pharaohs, to the Egyptian empires of old. You will have Aksum, which conquers the Kush by 300 BCE, and again, they're going to continue on with your pharaohs. And then Ethiopia will take conquest of Aksum. They will develop their own state. They will trade with the Mediterranean, and you're going to have some converts to Judaism and especially to Christianity by 300 CE. West Africa will be affected a little bit. Your southern fringe of the Sahara, your regional kingdoms, especially over in the west with Ghana. We'll be looking at some of these regions like Mali and Songhai. We'll be looking at them later on in Chapter 8. Here are some of your trade routes with Aksum. They are going to be trading with parts of the Middle East, parts of the Mediterranean. They will have contact with India as well. And so they will have other aspects of culture and politics affecting their way of life as well. And plus, right above them, you're having Egypt. Here's some of the areas that I mentioned in Africa. And again, we will be covering them in Chapter 8. Okay, beyond the classical civilizations, Asia, Japan. Japan is going to start to take its foundation and its formation right here, and we'll be studying them a little bit more in the post-classical age. But some key foundational things occur, such as agriculture is established by 200 CE. They will have regional states, so very fragmented. They have a ton of them that we'll be looking at later on. Well, about 300 CE. Writing is introduced. Shintoism, which is a religion that they will develop. So they're going to give a little bit more of that spiritual essence than China had. And then, of course, they'll have a state formation by about 600 CE, and that's when we'll be looking at them later on in the post-classical era. But they're going to be affected by China, Chinese culture, the Asian culture that comes over, and they will be fighting to distinguish themselves from this point on, and we'll see a lot of that later on in the post-classical era. Closer view of Japan. One thing to note geography-wise, all right, this is Korea. A lot of people put Japan further down next to China. It's higher up next to Korea, Manchuria, and of course that's Russia right over there. So they're extremely close, not further down. Just remember that in your geography because that could help you out with writing and also multiple choice questions. Beyond the classical civilization, Northern Europe, Germanic, Celtic, Slavic people, all coming from the north. They're going to be pushing down. They have loose kingdoms, oral culture, not as developed, not as sophisticated as what you have in the Roman Empire, not what you have in India, not what you have in China. Very simple agriculture, nothing too complex, no commercial estates. They were good at sailing though. You'll have the Vikings who were good sailors, they're explorers, obviously they're pillaging areas as well. And then your amistic, this is where there's the belief that souls go beyond humans. You have souls in nature of animals and plants as well. A lot of the Germanic, Celtic, and Slavic people up to the north had a lot of different spiritual views of the soul. Here's a view of our Roman Empire in the areas that were split, and especially the areas that are going to affect the western part of the Roman Empire. Beyond the classical civilization, Central America. All right, we'll be briefly bringing this up, and of course you can see the date 800 to 400 BCE. This is one of the reasons why this is kind of not mentioned with our other river valley civilizations, but it is noted. You're not going to have a formal writing with the Olmecs, but you will have pyramids. They'll have a square top, but still the base architecture-wise. Agriculture, especially with corn and potatoes in the Andes, domestication of the animals. So there were some developments of civilization here, very similar to other areas. Turkeys and dogs with that domestication. They will have a calendar that is developed. And their legacy to successor cultures, you'll get the Mayans from this. You'll get the Toltecs and the Mayans and the Incas coming down, which are more Peru and South America, which is a view here of these areas. So the Aztec in the orange, your Olmecs in the yellow, your Toltecs in the green, the Mayan in the purple. This is an intermediate zone. Mayan Empire kind of spreads a little bit more into this area. And then the Inca going along the Andes. Here are your trade routes. Here's some of your North American cultures. We won't get into a lot of the Native Americans here in the U.S. as much, but your Mississippian culture, one of the older ones during this time period. They're the ones that built the mounds. Early Americas at a glance, I would take a look at this. It's in your power notes as well. And here's another map breaking up the regions of where the people existed and where their center of civilization was. Moving into South America, as I mentioned, the Incas. Moving over, other side of the globe, or just go right across the Pacific, to the Polynesian area. Very isolated. This is where you're going to get a lot of your islands. You'll have Fiji in this region. They will end up making their way up to Hawaii by 400 CE. A lot of Polynesian culture in there. They're also going to spread not only their culture, but they'll also spread a lot of their crops as well along these areas. And they were good seamen as well, especially with their dugouts. They understood the sea currents and directions and what types of seasons to go in. And then the other place to look at is nomads in Central Asia, and also you could also say North Africa with your Bedouins in these areas. And we'll be looking at them especially in Chapter 6. And this is Asia to the Middle East trade. Here's our Polynesian trade networks, general routes of migration and trade. Here's another image of that in our map. Okay, decline in India and China. China, Han Dynasty, decline around 100 CE. You're going to have a Taoist revival. The Yellow Turbans, they are going to have a conflict with the emperor, losing the mandate of heaven. They're going to have their struggles with the emperor's power and how much power he should have. And they're also going to rebel against the bureaucracy, who they believe has become corrupt and worldly and is not looking after the better of society. You're going to also have epidemics during this time period, which is also going to be a trade problem with your merchants. Some diseases are going to come in and some are going to go out and affect other areas as well. You're going to have one of your longest periods of chaos and of battling for war with your landlords and some regionalism occurring. And so there'll be a big break between the Han Dynasty and when things start to get revived. This is one thing to note with Han China. Things do revive. Obviously not the dynasty itself, but the culture, the Confucianism, your bureaucracy, your government, your way of Chinese life is going to revive under the Sui or Sui dynasty. And then of course the Tang, which will be one of the more famous ones we study, from about 618 CE. And you're going to see a huge continuity in the culture that is revived from what used to be the classical age. Here's the spread of Buddhism from India over to Southeast Asia and over to Asia with China. India, invasions from 600 CE. We always talked about India and their fragmented government, and of course they're a little bit more susceptible because of location. They weren't isolated as much as China was. The Gupta Empire will be destroyed by 600 CE, and it's going to be fragmented and ruled by regional princes of invaders or local rulers that were able to gain their power back. And so these will be under their princes. Buddhism will decline in India. It's going to spread and become major religions in other areas. Hinduism worship of Devi or Devi was popular. Again, I apologize for pronunciations. This will be your mother goddess. So again, Hinduism continuing to adapt to what is occurring in its area. One of the things that we'll be battling with is Islam from the 7th century onward. And of course, their merchants are going to struggle as well. Eventually, the Islamic merchants are going to take control of the Indian Ocean and become a major trading force, well, all the way up into the 1300s. It won't be until Europeans finally find a route around Africa. So they'll have it up until the 1400s. They'll have kind of a monopoly on that Indian trade network area. Here's some of the sea routes that you have in the southern Asia, Africa area. The orange will be part of your Silk Road. These are obviously sea routes, other trade routes over to the Mediterranean, parts of Africa, Southeast Asia. This includes your monsoon season. This was on the map a couple years ago on the AP exam. So understanding how to read this map, I would look at it. All right, the decline and fall in Rome. All right, a lot of changes, leadership changes. You're going to have weak emperors. I mentioned this earlier in the previous chapter. You have 5 good emperors. Your Pax Romana with Marcus Aurelius. You're going to have 5 bad emperors as well. Nero, who's a brutal ruler, destroys and kills a lot of Jews. You're also going to deal with plagues at this time. That's going to deplete a lot of your population. Changes from Republican values, hedonism, which is worldly pleasures. Again, a lot of historians believing that the Roman upper elites, the upper echelon, your senators becoming too focused, too self-absorbed with themselves than with the idea of Rome, and they started having less kids. Education wasn't cared about. They just kind of weren't coming or weren't making new ground in areas. They were just rewriting what had already been done and republishing those items in their literature. So ideas of creativity were lost, ideas of philosophy lost, or not even necessarily lost, but they weren't moving forward. They weren't gaining anymore. They become stagnant in a lot of these cases. Diocletian's going to split the empire. He's also going to come up with the idea of emperor worship, and you having to worship the emperor, something Caesar had said as well. Constantine will be in the eastern part of the Roman Empire and will form Constantinople and will establish Christianity as well, which really helps hold together the eastern part, as well as trade and culture is flourishing in the eastern part of the empire. One of those reasons they're still having contact with other areas of Asia, and so that helps out their part of the Mediterranean. 2 empires, and this is also going to cause some divisions here too, and we'll look at these later on in the post-classical era, is the eastern part is going to go with Greek. They're going to have a great continuity, a great vigor about life and prosperity, and it's going to be, almost a world of a difference between these 2 areas and how they are, and that's going to eventually form the Byzantine Empire. The western part was going to go with Latin and Germanic tribes. In the Roman area, we'll study them a little bit with Charlemagne. We'll study the Great Schism and the split that they have with the Catholic Church that is developing during this time period. They will be in decline. They're going to be more vulnerable. They have a lot of these smaller kingdoms pushing in upon them. And Justinian is going to be in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, and he's going to come up with the Justinian Code, a code of law, and he's going to try and reestablish and reconquer parts of the Western Empire, which he does succeed at, but then with his passing, that is all going to be lost. Here's the split of your Roman Empire. Here's the invasion routes that come in. The Huns are a huge important part. They are going to push a lot of these Germanic tribes down. All right? The Huns are a fierce group to deal with, and they keep pushing in, and of course with your low populations, your plagues, your depletion because of taxes and poverty, they're able to push in and take over the eastern part, or the western part of the Roman Empire. And these are the regions broken up a little bit more for you. All right, the Middle East, your Parthian Empire, the Sassanids are going to form. They're going to be descendants from your Persian princes and kings from that empire, and they're going to be from 277 CE. There'll be a major empire in the Middle East. It's not going to be until we get to the more of the post-classical era where you'll see your Islamic empires rise. And again, with Zoroastrianism and their major religion of spirituality there. North Africa, Augustine is going to be your bishop of Hippo. You're going to have your Coptic church in Ethiopia, where some of the divinities are a little bit different with the Trinity and some of their doctrine differing a little bit. But they will become a major Christian state, and we'll even look at that in chapter 6 and 7, and them dealing with the Islamic influences in Africa. The fall of the Roman Empire in the West, I would review over this and look at it. It's a good, helpful understanding. Climate changes, soil exhaustion, racial population, slavery, intellectual stagnation, social disorder, excessive government, Christianity, immorality, all of these playing a role in the fall of Rome. The new religious map, all right, common features, piety, spiritual focus, afterlife, all very common. There's a question on the quiz. Emergent period of political instability as well. So these religions are able to take more force because the government isn't putting them down as much. Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, looking at Buddhism, you're going to have changes as it spreads. The Bodhisattvas, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, will be your holy men that help you from above and send aid to you to reach nirvana. Mahayana, which will occur in China, Korea, and Japan. It's a minority religion, but again, more spirituality. The people are looking for more answers about life and the afterlife and purpose and meaning. Here's your routes of spread of Buddhism. Hinduism, Buddhism lists of what occurs in their dates. It's almost a comparison chart. It's a great thing to look at. It's in your power notes as well. And then Christianity, institutional church. You're going to have Rome as the influence, your papacy, your bishops. You're getting more of your church in its foundations as a unit, more so than the people as the church. The Bible will refer to the people as the church. This is going to be the point where you start to get the structure of like a building organization starting to get established. Jesus of Nazareth will be your salvation. The spread of Christianity to the Gentiles, non-Jews, will be by Paul. Your doctrine, which is the Trinity, it's the Father, which is God, it's the Son, which is Jesus, and it's the Holy Ghost, which is the Holy Spirit. It's the essence of them here on earth. Benedict of Nursia, your monasticism rules. These are for your monks, their vows that they're taking. And then, of course, women, spiritual equals to men. Christianity is still going to view men as higher than women, and more so in different parts and times of history than other times. But they will view them as a spiritual equal, and this will get lost in some of the areas in power struggles among the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, and then of course we'll see this later on in the post-classical era as well, with the struggles the Catholic Church has. But you'll see it does talk about women being the spiritual equal of men. Sites in the life of Jesus on a map here. Here are Paul's missions to the Gentiles and areas that he traveled and went to. He was a Roman citizen, so he was able to travel and deal with law a lot better than other people were. Again, taking pride in being a Roman citizen, it aided Paul in his opportunities to spread Christ's teachings. Judaism and Christianity, again on a timeline list and comparison. This was in your power notes as well. I will look at that. The spread of Christianity to the Roman Empire by AD 600. So you can see the spread of it. New religious maps, Islam, later in the 7th century, they're going to be pushing over into India, pushing over into North Africa, and they're going to be on the border of Byzantine for a couple hundred years, and we're going to see those struggles that they have. The spread of major religions, animism declines, because Christianity moves in, Islam moves in. This will be the movement of monotheism, which was a question on the quiz as well. And then the world around 500 CE, there's still a lot of prosperity here. There's still a lot of opportunity. While major civilizations are coming to an end, other areas are going to start to spring up and bring about new ideas, new religion, and even ideas of the old will come back. You still have the caste system as a continuity, and you will get the Chinese culture as a continuity.